During these early years, my school life was rather easy and boring. I maintained good grades and kept a low profile. The teaching sisters of the St. Joseph Order at St. Leo's were very nice, but were bewildered at my indifferent attitude regarding religion. To please them by becoming a choir and altar boy, I received hugs and doublemint chewing gum, but soon quit as it took up too much of my time. I have often wondered why and where nuns chew so much gum. Every nun I have ever known carries stacks in their deep habit pockets, but you never see them chewing or buying it. About midway through the 7th grade, an incident occurred which made me decide to leave St. Leo's for a public school. In order to survive in my neighborhood, I had to either join the local gangs, which I didn't care much less to pay tribute, or to establish one of my own. I picked the latter through sheer circumstance. Although I preferred to keep most of my action away from my home territory, I did have one nice thing going. I was a numbers courier for Tony the barber, who owned the local shop. I had to thank my stepfather for this. Like all ill-fated people, he regarded himself as an expert in many fields, one of them being a barber. Soon after he married Mother, I had the sad misfortune to be a subject of his skill. The end result convinced me he wasn't qualified to shovel horse manure out of a barn. This is how my connection with Tony the barber began. Within an hour after having my head butchered, I paid Tony to repair the damage as much as he could. The results, though shorter than I liked, were passable. After that, he agreed to tell my stepfather he was giving me free cuts in exchange for my sweeping up his shop. Tony's barbershop was just a front for many illegal operations, which were headquartered in the back room, and I found this out a little later on. During the Great Depression, a barber in a working-class neighborhood could starve to death. In those days, most adults and kids looked as if they executed their haircuts with the help of a soup bowl and sheep shears. I was about 10 when Tony asked if I would like to pick up some extra scratch. Having readily agreed, arrangements were made for my safe conduct through the Black District. I began picking up numbers receipts from a huge, fat, black lady called Grandma. Along with the receipts, I was given packages containing bootleg whiskey in half-pint and pint bottles to take back to the shop. It wasn't long until I branched out into the Hebrew newspaper and kosher food delivery business. 2 doors from my house was a shoe repair shop, owned by a Russian Jew named Sam. One day he asked if I would pick up his newspaper and foodstuff from a Jewish store located on Dixon Street. This was in the heart of the colored community, and I had met Sam there when I had stopped for a cream soda. He was surprised to see me in this area, and had asked how I could commute back and forth without trouble. I told him I had business to perform for others. He understood immediately that the word was out not to bother me. Soon after, I was picking up additional orders for other Jewish contacts in my neighborhood. As this was done on my return trips from Grandma's, it was like found money. By my being in the colored area so much, this provided me with a legitimate excuse in case I should ever be questioned. One day, 3 older white kids tried to hijack me just within running distance from the white section. They backed me against a wall with my bike in one hand and my knife in the other, and were threatening to smash my head in if I didn't go along with their program. I told them to forget it and take a hike, or they would be in big trouble with the people for whom I worked for. Fortunately for all of us, 4 older black kids appeared out of nowhere. They asked if these guys were bothering me, and, before I could answer, the white kids took off running, with the black kids hot on their tail. Within minutes the white kids crossed the border and the black kids came back to see if I was okay. This is how I became acquainted with baby brother, LC, Jr., and Sure. I had seen them on many occasions and always waved, hello, to which they'd respond with, hi, Whitey. My hair was very blonde and was nicknamed Whitey in my neighborhood, so I knew they had the word. I thanked them for their help and gave them $1 to split for treats. They soon started helping me with my delivery business and later ran a crap game, scrap metal, and other businesses for me in their neighborhood. My black group and I were walking down the street one day when a car with nuns on their way back to the convent happened to pass. The next day one of the nuns, Sister Oliace, who was my teacher, told me to stay after school as she had something to say to me. She told me how shocked she was to see me associating with those colored boys. She said, "James, you looked like an albino with them." Now, this was the last straw. I had seen many incidents which convinced me that witchcraft, in any form, was full of shit, piss, and corruption, perpetuated by greed and stupidity. The previous Sunday I was late for Mass. Upon my arriving I found colored people kneeling on the hard, cold cement and marble steps in the back of the church. They were peering into the church trying to follow the services. I thought of all the years I had attended this church, never realizing the colored people were back there, worshiping a God who allowed them to be treated like segregated garbage. In those days, colored people were not allowed in public parks, theaters, churches, restaurants, or restrooms unless marked colored. On public transportation, they had to sit in the back, keep quiet, and be ready to give up their seats to any white who had no place to sit. Sister Oliace was one of my favorite people, and she could not have hurt me more. I told her in very strong terms she didn't practice what she taught. I asked her if God loved the colored less than the others he had created. She was stuck for an answer, and the only thing she came up with was a wishy-washy one about society frowning on whites with colored. I told her she had made the wrong choice when she became a nun, that she was a hypocrite who could go to hell, and I was quitting school and the church. She told me she was going to report me to Father Butler, the parish head, to which I replied that he was a fat, corrupt slob who could go to hell with her, and walked out. Father Butler was someone I never liked, because of his mixing state and religion by serving as a juvenile judge, and felt he was a reincarnate Spanish Inquisition. Any kid appearing before this heartless, arrogant bastard was sure to be sent to a reform school. I clearly recall our confrontation because it was the last time I ever saw her, although I have thought of her often. 40 years later, an old school friend named Helen Collam attended a class reunion and told me Sister Oliace was there and inquired of me. Obviously, she too never forgot our last meeting. I told my mother what happened and of my intent to switch to public school. She agreed by saying, "If that is what you really want, it's all right with me." The next day I was enrolled in Jackson Public Grade School. My first day in class convinced me public schools were far behind private ones. All the material presented as 7th grade stuff I already had in the 5th and 6th grades at St. Leo's. My third day of class I informed the teacher about it, and she took me to see the principal, Dr. Young. He said if I could pass the 7th grade test, he would jump me to the 8th grade, where I could graduate that same year. I now realize this was his way of getting rid of me so he could continue to maintain an incompetent system. I took the test and graduated that year. My former classmates at St. Leo's were envious, but I knew they would graduate with a better education. This experience made me realize, you win some and you lose some, nothing in life is equal except death. After graduation I decided high school would be a waste of time and spoke to Eddie Ross about it. He agreed, saying, "Thinkers are born and fools are educated." Eddie advised me to read various books but to never make a habit of reading fiction, but read only what I could learn from and nothing else. Eddie gave me my first book, Napoleon, by Emil Ludwig, which was published in 1926, the year I was born. I was 14 when the first realization of death's finality caught me by surprise. One morning I walked into Arata's and was met with silence. Frank took me aside and told me that Eddie's housekeeper had found him dead. Eddie had apparently gotten up that morning and was in the process of shaving with his straight razor when, halfway through, he must have decided he was tired of living and finished by cutting his throat. I was completely stunned. The night before, Eddie and I had our Wednesday night special of chicken and dumplings at the cafe down the street from Arata's, and he seemed okay.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching.